After narrating the entire Marvel Rivals story so far, at least from the perspective of our New York characters during Season 0, leading up to the events of Season 1, I want to thank you guys for all the support on that long video, and you can expect that to be how we continue moving forward. So now it's time to talk about all of the lore from Marvel Rivals Season 1 we've gotten so far, which serves as more or less a direct sequel to that 2-hour video. So with the Darkhold being at the center of this entire season, the first thing we're going to do is look at the lore entry for the book itself, which you can earn through the Battle Pass this season. A reminder that in your inventory you should actually have a few things relating directly to the lore that you can look back on when we're on like Season 10 for the fond memories of that long night that almost never ended. In the book it reads, "Among the many legacies left by Chthon, Wanda Maximoff may well be the most extraordinary, while the Darkhold is undoubtedly the most sinister. Every time a reckless and power-hungry sorcerer misuses the spells within its pages, the resulting devastation to the world is immense. But Doom is no mere amateur. His aim is to align with Dracula and pull the vampiric verses from inside the book. But another spell written within the Montesi formula can also eliminate all of them. Perhaps this is yet another of Chthon's cruel jokes, a testament to his eternal mockery of humankind." Now that information pretty much directly leads into a loading screen on the new Sanctum Santorum map that was just recently added to the game, where we get a visual of Doctor Strange floating, conjuring a spell through the Eye of Agamotto while the Darkhold floats in front of him. The lore entry for this specific loading page, and you know, there actually are those, they're really small at the bottom, but I feel like a lot of people haven't actually noticed it there. It actually reads, "To keep the Darkhold out of the wrong hands, Doctor Strange hid the cursed tome in a place where even he could not find it." And again, you can learn about this in detail in part 1 and 1.5 of our story so far. So now, before we can really go any further, it's time to describe how exactly New York was placed into this endless night, and that lets us clarify something from the last video. You see, from everything we had before this point, the lore seemed to suggest that maybe it had been Khonshu who set forth the Eternal Night using the Darkhold. However, now we learn that this is actually incorrect, and it was very much Dracula, thanks to the Thicker Than Blood gallery card you can earn this season. "Tell me, why have you come here? You are a long way from Latveria. I have brought you a gift, from one king to another. A tribute befitting the Lord of the Vampires," replied Dr. Doom. "A gift from Victor Von Doom. Huh, do you think me a fool? Another one of your era's pathetic supervillains, whose loyalty can be purchased with mere baubles? I am Dracula. I have reigned over the night for centuries, and with this crystal, perhaps that reign could become permanent, as could the night itself. Ah, now you've piqued my curiosity, masked one. Do tell me more. What you hold in your hand is called Chronovium. It was born from an experiment of mine that caused the very fabric of time and space to unravel and reweave itself in unexpected ways. As the chronal energy release in the process stabilized again, it took this crystalline form. Shards of pure time? Fascinating. Not as fascinating as what could be achieved with this gem by one such as yourself. I have studied both the scientific data and the ancient text. If my theory is correct, a single drop of blood from an immortal being such as yourself could unlock the vast power held within this crystal. You could gain control over time in a limited area. Imagine a modern metropolis, locked in a state of unending darkness, becoming a permanent feeding ground for your minions, an empire of eternal night where you rule supreme. How lovely that would be, if it were true. But I have never been given reason to trust your words before. Doom. Why would I begin now? Because we both have much to gain from this arrangement. If you were to choose New York City as your new domain, your legion of followers would keep the so-called heroes who dwell there fully occupied. It would allow us both the freedom to pursue our greater goals. And what greater goal is there than the eternal night? An existence where your people can walk in the daylight without any fear or harm, and with the proper spell, pulled from the pages of the Darkhold and enhanced by the power of this crystal, then Doom believes that dream could become a reality. The vampiric verses. Indeed. There is something more you are not yet revealing to me. Doom never reveals all, but I promise you on the soul of my mother, this is not an act of deception. What I have offered you will come to pass, should you choose it to. And all it takes is one drop of blood, you say? Just one drop. I do believe I can spare that much. After all, the streets of New York will be running red with it soon enough. Now, we know that the events of this lore entry lead directly into Khonshu trying to get his hands on the Darkhold, as we learned in part 2 of our story. We can see the conflict between Khonshu against Doom and Dracula in this loading screen for the Sanctum Santorum map, with Dr. Doom, Dracula, and Khonshu all together, despite the fact that again they're not actually together. With the Darkhold floating in front of them, opened up to the pages that hold the vampiric verses and the Montesi formula. The lore entry for this screen reads, "The Darkhold contains 2 powerful spells that have aroused interest in opposing forces. The vampiric verses can create creatures of the night, while the Montesi formula can eliminate them." Now, luckily for New York during all of this, it's not like every service in the city has gone completely offline, as at the very least Jonah Jameson and the folks over at the Bugle are still working. And it's through this season's event Midnight Features where we get some exposition from him, allowing us to keep up with the events of this season from a more street level perspective, while the articles themselves that are part of this event actually point towards the lore as well. In the article, Central Park Goes Goth, it states, "The exact source of the vampire infestation in New York City remains uncertain, but sources indicate that Dracula himself may be to blame. The rumor has gained traction thanks to a recent addition to the city skyline, a Gothic castle that appeared in Central Park. This architectural eyesore is believed to be the home base for the growing vampire army." Below this description, we have a number of missions to complete, like number 2, Protectors of Night Travelers, which is to defeat 40 enemies in Empire of Eternal Night Midtown as Mr. Fantastic, Sue Storm, Scarlet Witch, Moon Knight, or Doctor Strange, or we can defeat 60 enemies as Psylocke, Adam Warlock, Winter Soldier, Doctor Strange, or Iron Man. These characters aren't random, of course, as most of them are wrapped up in this New York story. However, it seems like Psylocke, Adam Warlock, and Winter Soldier are off on the side, likely helping the Thing and Johnny Storm with whatever they're up to while all of this is going on, since we know that they're involved in the story here, but they don't appear too frequently, which makes me believe that they'll have more focus in the second half of this event. From here, we can read the Eternal Nightfalls gallery card though, which says, "Bad news, loyal readers. We're bringing you yet another morningless morning edition of New York's finest newspaper, the Daily Bugle. Why? Because our beloved neighborhood borough has been trapped in a state of never-ending night for who knows how long. That's why. As publisher of this peerless periodical, it's up to me, Jonah Jameson, to provide you with all the info you need to know to navigate this perpetual pitch. So here's the scoop. Our intrepid reporters still don't have a single solid source willing to admit what caused Manhattan to become an empire of eternal night, but anonymous scientists have independently confirmed that a massive wave of chronal energy washed over our planet shortly before things went dark. Coincidence? I think not. 2. Like something out of a bad horror movie, our city streets are now being stalked by vampires. You heard me right. These bloodsuckers have been draining veins faster than my libel lawyers drain my bank account. Our former friends and neighbors, they're quickly turning into our worst enemies. 3. Rumor has it that Dracula himself has taken up residence in Central Park. Sounds a bit far-fetched to me, but if that Cape Creeper is really organizing an army, we'd all be better off relocating to New Jersey, and those aren't words this lifelong New Yorker says easily. 4. So, where are all the superheroes? Eyewitnesses have identified members of the Fantastic Four coming and going regularly from their stronghold in the Baxter Building. As always, the Richards family is on the front line of the crisis, and we here at the Bugle applaud them for their selfless service. 5. Tony Stark recently issued a press release claiming that he and Reed Richards are collaborating on a number of innovative solutions to restore New York to its former glory as quickly and efficiently as possible. However, my source on the inside suggests that these two big brains might be at odds when it comes to how exactly they plan to end this endless night. Reed wants to save everyone, while Tony is still calculating how many losses are acceptable. My vote goes with Richards. 6. Other heroes have been seen patrolling the streets, rescuing citizens stupid enough to wander beyond the safety of their apartments. Squirrel Girl, Moon Knight, Cloak and Dagger, you name them. They're probably out there risking their lives to save yours. So for once, I'm willing to put aside my personal distaste for costume crusaders and say, thank you, on behalf of the people of New York, to all those fighting the good fight. 7. Except for one. I have it on very good authority that the less than amazing Spider-Man dodged his duties and swung through a portal to have a spider party with his friends in the far-flung future. But I'll see if my favorite photographer Peter Parker can give me a solid snapshot of that web weirdo abandoning his adoring public. That's it for now, fearless readers. We'll have plenty more news for you tomorrow, if tomorrow ever comes. Signed, Jonah Jameson, publisher. Now, this actually tells us quite a bit about the situation looming in the Big Apple, but the situation only gets worse as time goes on, because Reed Richards has some bad news in the Midnight Features article Blood Moon over the Big Apple, which reads, Manhattan may be the only major metropolitan area trapped in a state of eternal night, but the whole world is feeling the impact. According to the Fantastic Four's Reed Richards, the blood moon's stationary position in our planet's orbit has led to dramatic shifts in the Earth tides, climate, and even its magnetic field, pushing communication systems to the brink of collapse. And as terrible as this is, as the heroes are still trying to figure out just where Doctor Strange is gone, the Midnight Features article, The Doctor's Out of His Mind, shows us that Dr. Doom and Dracula's weird ritual on the Chronovium had some odd effects on reality, with it being reported that renowned surgeon and rumored sorcerer Stephen Strange mysteriously disappeared just before the city was plunged into darkness, and now New Yorkers are outraged after discovering an offensive item on sale in the gift shop of his Sanctum Santorum on Bleecker Street, specifically a vampire-themed board game that some fear may be linked to the city's recent influx of bloodthirsty monsters roaming the streets. Here is the game itself, which Jonah thankfully posted a photo of, and we can see that it seems to be a game depicting Dracula fighting against not only Doctor Strange, but Blade and Squirrel Girl as well. This is interesting because we know, due to Squirrel Girl's lore, and try saying that 5 times fast, that she actually fought against Dracula and his vampires briefly in Central Park as he managed to sneak away with her new friend Ratatoskr, while Blade on the other hand was last seen during Spider-Man's lore entry as Dracula defeated all of the heroes there to eventually take Blade hostage and experiment on him back in his manor. Depending on when this appeared in the shop, this game actually could have told the future of the events that happened in those lore segments and what else is likely to take place over the course of this season, since you have to remember Chronovium is weird and it affects both the past and the future, making something like that not too unthinkable. Now, at some point in the early days of this Eternal Night, we see in the Fantastic Four reveal trailer, otherwise known as the Season 1 Eternal Night trailer, Dracula walks into the Sanctum Santorum while Strange is gone to look for the Darkhold, and as a result of this later on, he ends up infesting his home with vampires and eventually making it a battleground, which is the reason it's now a playable map in-game. From bits in lore and missions, we can pick up on the fact that the nearby hive has its roots in the sewers, but thankfully the home has portals that can help anyone inside get away or put up a fight if they so wish. And the story of how some of this happens is told through some of the missions in Midnight Features, like 1, the Getaway House, which needs you to trigger 5 portals in Doom Match since that takes place in the Sanctum Santorum. 2, there's the Bleeding City, which demands you take a whopping 30,000 damage in Empire of Eternal Night Midtown, specifying that you need to play as Doctor Strange, Scarlet Witch, Mr. Fantastic, or Cloak and Dagger. Lastly, there's also 3, Rats in the Subway, ordering you to defeat 50 enemies in Doom Match or land 6 2-player KO streaks as Captain America, Spider-Man, Squirrel Girl, or Adam Warlock. Rats seem to be a central theme in this season because of course Dracula has some control over rodents, and that leads to a number of emotes where our characters are interacting with the rats, since I'm sure especially in New York City, these things are everywhere with the city in its current state. Finally though, after even more time has gone by in New York City with everyone trying their best to survive, we get a lore entry that serves as a direct sequel to Doctor Strange and Wanda's previous conversation about Strange having a game scheduled against Khonshu where he wants to try to win back the Darkhold, because if you recall, Khonshu was able to reach through astral space and steal the book for himself. In the ancient Game Gallery Cards lore entry, we learn just how things progressed from here. It reads, "Ever since I started hanging around with my pal Stephen Strange, he's always told me the same thing. Bats, he says, being the sorcerer supreme of this dimension means that I do not have the time for games. But I guess that was just something he made up to get out of playing fetch with yours truly, because apparently when there's a high-stake game to be played for the fate of all reality, the Doctor is all in. See, a while back we got paid a visit by another so-called doctor of what I'm not really sure. This one called himself Doom. Doom. He wanted to get his hands on one of the spell books in Strange's library, but this tome, a book of magic called the Darkhold, was strictly off limits. Doom weren't thrilled about that fact, and Stephen had a feeling that his fellow doctor was bound to come knocking again. So Stephen decided that the safest option would be to open a rift between realities and stash the Darkhold where no one would find it ever again. And this is where things get a little kooky, even for a ghost dog like me. Time itself got turned upside down, and Strange ended up lost in the astral plane for a hot minute. While he was there, he searched for the Darkhold to make sure it was still safe, but surprise, it had somehow fallen into the bony hands of an Egyptian moon god by the name of Khonshu. Khonshu. This bird-skulled freak had been protecting travelers in the night for centuries, and he thought the best way to keep doing that would be to use the Darkhold to eliminate the vampires that had overrun New York City. Not a bad plan, honestly, except for the fact that it would hurt thousands of regular folks who had been unwillingly turned to the dark side. Khonshu took Strange captive and tried to make the Doc cast that nasty spell for him, but Strange knew he had to shut Khonshu down. Luckily, the Scarlet Witch had reminded Steven that Khonshu loved a good game of Senet, which is some kind of fancy Egyptian board game like chess. Even better, Khonshu wasn't particularly great at the game. Seriously, according to legend, he lost a match to some other god named Thoth and forfeited his radiance as part of the wager. I'm telling you, that's the whole reason the moon waxes and wanes. Look it up, I'm telling you, I'm not lying. Anywho, Strange played the game of his life, securing not only his freedom, but recovering the Darkhold as well. Funny part is, Steven used a strategy that Doc Doom had himself unintentionally tipped him off to, moving his piece to the House of Truth space and drowning Khonshu's in the House of Water, giving the Doc a chance for a major comeback. It was a big gamble, but one that paid off. And now that he's back and safe and sound, I haven't even gotten on his case about always turning me down whenever I want to play. The guy did save thousands of innocent lives after all. He deserves a pass this time. But you'd better believe the next time I ask him to toss a ball for me, I ain't taking no for an answer. We can see the events of this story taking place thanks to the Sanctum Santorum victory screen in Doom match, where Doctor Strange floats in Khonshu's realm, having won the game against the God of the Moon, who lashes out and tries to take it back from Strange by force. To do this, he uses a massive bandage-wrapped hand to reach toward our sorcerer. However, thankfully, as previously agreed, Wanda uses her chaos magic to pull Doctor Strange out of there, bringing him back to reality into New York City, as the price that her chaos magic seems to have taken for this feat is the actual binding of the Darkhold, which disintegrates, leaving every page flying away over the city. So, the heroes have to take the good of the bad here. Now they can add Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange to their ranks in fighting against the vampires, as heroes from other realities keep pouring into New York to help through different means. However, on the flip side, now pages of the most dangerous book in creation are all just scattered around the city, and to make matters worse, probably one of the best people to ask for helping and picking all the pages up is gone. That's because in the Midnight Features article, Spider-Man, Villain or Vampire, Jonah Jameson reports, Midtown's been massacred by monsters, so where's the so-called spectacular Spider-Man? This publisher has had his suspicions. Unless New York's most dangerous vigilante is off cowering in a corner somewhere, it's more than likely he's joined forces with the creatures of the night. Can you imagine a sinister Spider-Vamp, loyal reader? As if that web-slinging wacko wasn't already bad enough. This likely references the absence that Spider-Man has to take from New York because of things going on with the web of life and destiny, something that we'll delve deeper into soon enough. However, for now, Spider-Man's absence leads directly into what comes next. The fall of Midtown. An event referenced in the lore entry of a gallery card by the same name, which reads, Name's Blade. Folks call me that because of the swords I use to slice the heads off of every vampire I cross paths with. To be fair, I use a lot more than swords. Wooden stakes, silver bullets. Hell, I'll use a squirt gun full of holy water if that's what it takes to put a fanger down for good. I ain't picky. I've been hunting vamps my whole life, sending the undead back to their graves to make the night a safer place for the living. It ain't an easy job, but I'm one of the few with the skills or the guts to do it. When I heard that Dracula had some sort of master plan brewing, you could bet I jumped on the first red out of Transylvania. Turns out Drac wasn't home. He decided to make New York City his new stomping grounds, and he had a trick up his sleeve that even I didn't see coming. Somehow that freak cast a spell that stopped the sun from rising, trapping Manhattan in a state of non-stop darkness. That made New York City the perfect place for his hungry horde to run wild 24/7. Even worse, it took away my biggest advantage. See, I'm half vampire, half human. I've got all the powers of a regular vamp, plus the bonus of being able to walk and hunt in broad daylight. But when the dawn don't ever come, well, it means my usual way of doing things ain't gonna cut it anymore. Found that out the hard way when I got back to New York. I sliced a trail through an army of fangers straight to Central Park. Dracula already had a fortress there, and I was itching to pay him a visit. Whole time he knew I was coming and wanted to give me a proper welcome, it seems. That pasty creep ambushed me. And even though I fought for my life alongside Spider-Man and the Human Torch, he got the upper hand and hauled me away to the dungeon beneath his castle. Gotta say, it was a smart move on his part. When you know who your biggest threat is, you take them out first, right? That's why I was going after Drac, and the fact that he felt the same way about me is kinda an honor. Or it would be if I weren't shackled to the wall in this rat-infested cesspit. I ain't the only one Dracula needed out of the way either. Apparently there's some Asgardian squirrel named Ratatosker whose enchanted horn can end the life of whatever it pierces, no matter how immortal. Drac summoned that magic scroll to Earth and locked it up in chains too. With his most dangerous foes off the board, Dracula's minions have free reign over the city. Sure, there are other heroes trying to take him down, but the numbers are in Drac's favor. All I can do is wait and hope that somebody eventually sets me free. is gonna be a long night. This gives us some much needed Blade perspective on everything that's happening here and shows us that for the moment, while he is captured, it isn't impossible for him to get a message out here and there. However, with Blade and Ratatoskr captured as well as Spider-Man missing, Dracula takes this opportunity to double down even harder on the city by ordering every single one of his vampire spawn to scour the city in search of the exact page of the Darkhold that he needs. We can see this in this new Midtown map loading screen as vampires begin looking through pages of the Darkhold and whatever other loose pages there are floating through the city. Its lore entry reads, once the Darkhold's pages were scattered, Dracula deployed all of his forces at his disposal, seeking but a single page, the Vampiric Verses. And the loading pages for this map are actually really informative because it's through them that we see a few other really interesting things. Firstly, Iron Man and Moon Knight arguing with Reed and Strange, with the lore entry explaining this by saying, meanwhile, the heroes of New York heatedly argue about whether or not they should harness the power of the Montese formula to destroy their foes. Afterwards, we get another loading screen showing us Reed's course of action as we see Reed loading Herbie with the information he needs to find the Montese formula page of the Darkhold before the vampires do. The lore reads, Mr. Fantastic and his robot assistant Herbie agreed that they need to locate the formula first so their opponents could not put it to use, and by opponents, he means Moon Knight and Iron Man as well. So the battleground is set between these two sides, and during the course of our matches on the new Midtown map, it tells us the story of what exactly happens depending on how your game goes. First off, on the defending team, when loading into the map, you get to see a giant Iron Man suit powering up as it tries to destroy as many vampires as it can. However, Dracula's vampires swarm together into a massive bat, critically damaging the mech as it falls back down towards Midtown, where through your efforts on the map, you can trigger Wanda's chaos magic through recursive damage, allowing her to fix the giant Iron Man suit and the building it fell on, and allowing Tony to keep up the fight against the vampires with his huge weapon, since again, he's having trouble targeting the vampires with his usual arsenal, but more on that later. Now, as defenders, if you win, you see a shot where Moon Knight stands in front of Avengers Tower, which currently has no power and has had his logo flipped upside down into a red V for Vampire. As Moon Knight spots Herbie on the Fantastic car trying to find the page from the Darkhold before he does, he actually splits the car in half, sending Herbie running away, and despite the fact that Herbie isn't exactly a living thing, putting this thing in danger still shows how serious Moon Knight and Khonshu are about getting their way. Now, on the other hand, if you're on the opposing side and actually are pushing the payload, which you may notice has Herbie on it, after going through the elevator in your intro animation and winning the game by getting Herbie all the way to his destination, you'll see a win screen showing Herbie restoring power to Avengers Tower, seemingly teleporting many of the pages from the Darkhold to Wanda and Strange, who float outside ready to collect them, more or less giving Reed and Strange the edge in this little back and forth between them and Tony. Now we can see how these events played out a little in the Midnight Features article Blood Moon over the Big Apple, which has different missions surrounding this map, like one, who needs damage control, tasking you with triggering recursive destruction 3 times in Empire of Eternal Night Midtown, basically to allow Wanda to clean up some of what's been damaged. Then there's mission 2, Everybody Hates Reed, which orders you to defeat 5 enemies with Brainiac Bounce as Mr. Fantastic, or launch 10 enemies with Force Physics as Sue Storm, showing that these two are still very much involved in the fight beyond everything else they're doing. And 3, If You Can Make It Here, wants you to win 2 matches in Empire of Eternal Night Midtown, basically making the ending where the Darkhold is collected canon. From here, it makes sense what follows, because regardless of what happens to the Darkhold itself or its pages, collecting it isn't going to immediately rid them of their Eternal Night problem or Dracula himself. So to accomplish this, and realizing now is a great opportunity to do something he's wanted to do for a while, Moon Knight capitalizes on basically being the leader of the Dracula resistance. In his Midnight Features article, Bad Moon Knight Rising, J. Jonah reports that, when danger stalks the night, we have to take heroes where we can find them. Located in a back alley in Greenwich Village, the Midnight Mission has long been rumored to be the base of operations for the vigilante known as Moon Knight. Are the colorful lights emanating from within part of some ancient ritual? The Daily Bugle will investigate. This leads us directly into the Midnight Mission's gallery card with its lore entry reading, Don't know if you can hear me right now, Khonshu. It's never been like you to actually listen to anyone's prayers. But if by some strange chance, this is one of the rare moments where you've decided to give a damn, you might as well know what your Moon Knight has been doing in your name. You send me here to New York City to continue your sworn mission, keeping travelers in the night safe from peril. And that's been no easy task now that the entire city has been overrun by vampires. But luckily, I'm not the only one who's been looking to bust up Dracula's blood-sucking brood. Your knight has formed his own round table. We've been calling ourselves the Eternity Knights. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? It all started out when Iron Man and I came to the mutual realization that some of the other heroes we've aligned ourselves with
wouldn't be willing to get their hands or their costumes dirty. They're also hung up on the idea that some of these vamps used to be innocent civilians, that they aren't willing to accept the notion that every war has casualties. It's like you always taught me, vengeance comes at a steep cost. So does victory. Stark came around to my way of thinking pretty quickly, but not everyone followed suit. The Fantastic Four and that annoying girl with the squirrels were all too squeaky clean to do what needed to be done. So, while they're up in their ivory tower trying to figure out ways to save everyone, we're down here on the streets doing the real work, saving as many lives as we can, and ending the ones that can't be saved. Some of my crew are proud to be doing what we do so well. Wolverine and the Winter Soldier wear the ichor like it's a badge of honor. So does the new girl with the giant sword that speaks Japanese. She may be a better hunter than I am, but others don't want their reputations to be tarnished by the blood we're spilling. Good thing Stark has an endless flow of cash and a knack for design. He incorporated chronovium into his armor specs, tapping into its ability to rewind time. The results were some epic new suits with a Gothic aesthetic that hits all the right notes. And faces. We may not be the only ones sporting new threads though. We recently ran across a group of vamps near my hideout in Greenwich Village that were being led by a man in fancy white armor, and I could have sworn I recognized him from somewhere. Well, whoever he was, he looked like he was ready to give old Dracula a run for his money when it comes to leadership over the vampire army. And when he does, I want to be there to watch. In the meantime, I'll be here, keeping the streets safe and doing your dirty work for you just like a good fist of Khonshu does. As long as the moon stays out, your night will be at your service, whether you're listening or not. Damn bird.
Now, we'll return to this mystery about the strange man in white. However, from this lore, we learned that Moon Knight has basically recruited a large number of heroes into his Midnight Mission agency, and you can actually find the building in-game right here, showing it in all of its glory. We can't actually go inside, however, from what we can glean from everything this season, the lights inside are probably from some pretty dark magic, considering everyone's vampire hunting upgrades that they were equipped with as part of the Gothic Returnal set of items and cosmetics we got this season, and will likely continue to get in part 2, revolving around this new team of heroes. Moon Knight's new bloodskin from this set has a description that reads, "Although the eternal night implies moonlight, Khonshu was still sullen. Mark embraced the crimson moon's glow, patiently anticipating the opportunity foretold by Khonshu, an opportunity destined to arrive through a mortal named Strange." This tells us that despite the fact that Khonshu lost his game against Strange and is probably still a little pissed about it, Strange did share his plan of the Moon God, and through Khonshu, both of these separate teams eventually will come together by the end of the season to defeat Dracula. Now, Mark isn't the only one embracing the vampiric magic of the Blood Moon, which we learned in the lore entry for Iron Man's new Blood Edge armor, stating, "Steven, Reed, and I don't get to cracking on things we agree with often, but with just a few murmured words from Strange on this new chronovium Reed's been studying, they effortlessly tweaked my armor algorithm into something new. Once this is all over, I'll refine it to perfection, but for now, we can skip the bleeding edge and go to crazy." Now, this provides further context on just how everyone became reinforced with vampiric energy, sort of taking a page out of Blade's book and not really at the same time, because Blade may have been right that it takes a vamp to beat a vamp, but they were more or less able to do it without all becoming vampires themselves. Mostly. This pattern continues in Adam Warlock's new lore entry for his Blood Soul skin, which reads, "With undeath threatening all life, I sought out Dr. Strange, seeking to empower my incantations to vanquish these nocturnal fiends. Though not convenient, virtue must be upheld, as avoidance would never suffice." And this actually lets us know that after the events of Adam Warlock's Season 0 story, something that we're still in the middle of telling right now at the time of this video, he eventually ends up on Earth after fighting against Null with the Guardians of the Galaxy on Clintar. And now that he's arrived, he's gotten a massive upgrade from Doctor Strange, which should help him in both fights, allowing him to continue to use his Soul Stone to destroy pure evil. Lastly, of course, saving the best for last, we have Wolverine, who really gets some extra love in this new season, as not only does he get lore with his new Blood Berserker costume, but he also gets some for his MVP screen as well. First off, his costume's lore reads,
"I know a thing or two about living a long time. You tend to forget what fear is. Dracula's messed with the people I care about for far too long. So let's remind him why he should stay in his coffin."
This is badass, but it gets even cooler when you see his intro and MVP animations, as their lore reads,
The rage of the Wolverine is a force no one can challenge, not even the most menacing Blood Moon. Newborn monsters cower before their apex predator, and in this animation, we literally see Wolverine doing like the most Wolverine thing ever and just cutting the moon, which is crazy. I don't know how that works with the magic, but it seems like with his red claws, like maybe it's possible, maybe he actually sliced the moon? So all of these new Gothic Return skins look amazing, but in that Midnight Missions gallery card, we were teased with even more, like these skins for Winter Soldier and Psylocke that still aren't in the game and likely won't arrive until the second half of Season 1, along with their lore for everything happening on their side in the rest of this season. Now, before we end this video, I have to ask one huge question about something we saw though. Is the mysterious man armored in white Blade? There are definitely some differences in the images we have of him and this man's appearance, like the man in white armor not having any piercings and us not seeing his tattoos. Plus his hair is even a little different, but could it be him? I honestly myself believe that it is, just because of the fact that he does need another skin besides the default one when he comes to the game. But to get answers on this mystery man and the rest of the story, we need to wait for Midnight Features Part 2 when Johnny Storm and the Thing reach the game, and we get the other half of this season's lore, or Marvel Rivals could just do us dirty and make us wait until the beginning of Season 2 when Blade is likely to join the roster, hopefully having been freed from Dracula. But there's only one way to know, hopefully checking back here when the lore is released, so I'll see you guys later. This is Vocal Pineapple Academia. I upload all sorts of other stuff besides Rivals that you can check out on my channel, and next up I really am going to try to get this Asgard stuff done, so see you soon. Peace.